Thank you very much, and thanks, Rakesh, for a very good introductory address as the chairman of this vertical. I am thankful to Mr. Pujari, who just a couple of weeks back we had another program, and he was the chief guest. And now this is the program on a very important issue. In fact, India Energy Forum did not have this vertical as an exclusive focus because we have added in last 1 year a couple of new verticals to give a little more stress and emphasis on some of these subjects. And uh, this subject was being discussed, no doubt, but we thought that an exclusive vertical, and I approached Rakesh, and he readily agreed to chair this vertical with Mr. Singh as the convener of this vertical. And I think this program itself vindicates how much is needed to be discussed through such forums and such discussions, even on issues which pertain to the regulatory commissions of the states and the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. And I'm thankful to all the speakers who responded to the suggestion and request made by Rakesh Nath to participate and prepare for discussion on the subject. I think my understanding of the Regulatory Commission's role is quite uh, simple, that regulators have much bigger role in shaping the structure, shaping the norms, shaping the regulation of the entire power sector. And by regulator, I mean regulators as well as their appellate tribunals. It is not that these issues have not been discussed in the past and have not been attended to. They have been, but by and large, the general perception is that regulatory commissions have focused more on tariff-related matters, and some such developmental issues have, of course, been uh, uh, mentioned, have all been discussed. But then, as Rakesh Nath was just trying to elaborate, that the way things are happening and have been happening in last 5, 6 years, particularly on the energy scene, one has to see whether the response has to be faster, response has to be quicker and deeper, and maybe even subjects which have not been covered so far, but they do come on the overall development of the sector need to be brought in. Of course, we have different agencies. We have Central Electricity Authority, which has the role of Ministry of Power, has a role, the Department of Energy of different state governments have a role. But I think regulators do have an overarching role in how the electricity industry functions, and in the larger interest of economic development, in the larger interest of course, the consumers, and now, of course, on the issue of decarbonization. Now, that exclusive focus will make all the difference. Of course, we are talking at a time when we are trying to focus on decarbonization, and this month, last month, and even now has been so tough, and the crisis has been so deep that the more we try to avoid coal, the more we are getting into coal. So coal is not available here. Coal is not available from import sources, but if it is available, it is very high cost. So we want to reduce, but we want to increase. Both conflicting requirements. We have to have power, demand has increased, and therefore we go in there. And the pace at which we wanted to add solar, perhaps that pace has not fully been in line with our thought, and as a result, we do have difficulty. So, but that is true. That is true for any developmental activities. That you will not have only pluses and not minuses. We have to balance the two. And this role of reducing carbon footprint in Indian power sector profile is an enormous role. But till 2050, I made a point and I wrote a piece. I do not see that power generation through coal sources in terms of absolute value till 2050 is going to reduce, though proportion of power from coal sources will reduce. In my calculation, present 70% proportion of coal-based power generation. Even if they reduce to 30% by 2040 or 2050, still the absolute value of billion units will be much more than it is today. And it is in that context that one has to see how best we do the generation even through coal process so that it is most efficient. Are we generating power where heat rate is something like 3000 and sort of not allowing something where the heat rate can be in the range of 2200? Are we closing down our power plants which are in that range of 2800 to 3000 heat rate, or we are not? So these are some of the processes. The question is what role the regulators have. I think they do have a role. They do have a role for coordinating with various agencies to see that the overall impact of power development program is not only looked at from the point of economics or tariff, but they have to be looked upon also from the point of view of carbon footprint. Now that is one issue. As I said, I'm not saying that has not been at all attended to, but with the focus and with the thrust that it needs to be attended to, that yes, decarbonization is also on the agenda. And linked to decarbonization, what all needs to be done, what regulation has to be changed in transmission side, in distribution side, and distribution side. Even now, we have states and we have cities in India where losses are in the range of AT&C losses are in the range of 30%, 35%, 40%. And obviously, we have technical losses of higher order in rural areas. Now, why the response time needs to be a little faster than it has been, and not only, let me underline, not only by regulatory institutions, but by all institutions which are associated, because dynamics have changed and the speed at which things are happening have changed. Take, for example, emergence of solar. How best it could have been that by now, entire rural area, rural agriculture and rural electricity supply is through decentralized solar distributed generation. In which case, this huge transmission lines, huge distribution lines that we need to do, and we are not able to control. And because of that, the losses are very high. As Rakesh just now said, that decarbonization is not an issue only of generation side, but is also of demand. It's also of consumption side. Of course, in generation itself, a lot more needs to be done. The other day, we were discussing in some other context whether the merit order dispatch has an angle, has an orientation on heat rate, or it doesn't have. Because merit order is only on economics today. So that means if a power station produces power with variable cost of less than certain figure, it merits to be dispatched, even though the heat rate of that power station may be in the range of 2800 or 3000. And is there a contradiction? Or are there some deeper analyses that are required to be done? So these are the issues. The norms have to be viewed. And I wouldn't say that they have to be viewed only from the point of view of decarbonization or carbon emission footprint, but also from the point of view of overall thing. Because there, one angle that could happen is that even though the variable cost is less because of transportation cost being less, but then if the transportation is huge, there also you have a carbon footprint. If transportation is for 1,000, 2,000 kilometers, thereby makes the cost higher, you do have to take that into account. So it becomes a little more complex exercise of doing it, but it is worth doing it. Are we doing it? Or we have become too simplistic on the merit order dispatch. Merit order dispatch formulation, merit order dispatch approach needs to revisit, and that is not to say that the present thing I'm saying is wrong. It is just to say, look back and see whether all these angles, including the angle of carbon footprint, has been attended to or has not been attended to. So the focus needs to change in transmission, needs to change in distribution, need to change in energy efficiency. We set up Bureau of Energy Efficiency, but don't leave everything to Bureau of Energy Efficiency. There are different wings to do and attend to various responsibilities that have been given to them. But as I said, an overarching expectation, an overarching demand from the regulatory institution is from the point of view of this institution being a quasi-judicial body, and a lot of hope and a lot of expectation has been put into the formulations that have gone into the Electricity Act and electricity rules. A lot has been done, let me say in the final point. It is not that not much has been done, although Rakesh pointed out a number of suggestions. but a lot more needs to be done. And that is the reason that we thought let's focus on this subject, which is so contemporary and which is so essential. And expectation in coming days and months will be much more from the regulatory institutions at the central level and at the state level. Thank you very much. I will come back again during the question answer and the summing up. Thanks a lot. What I said was that the proportion of coal-based power generation, and in the coal itself, we are not talking in the sense of the method that we have been using so far. There is considerable pressure and considerable amount of preparation that is going on in the matter of how coal will be used for power generation. Maybe coal to hydrogen could also be a process. And so therefore, the technological disruptions would also involve coal being used both pre-combustion and post-combustion in a different manner. So that is one point. Second point which I mentioned was that proportion-wise it will go down. 70%, it may go down 70% to almost 30% in that range. And nobody knows exactly 2050 what will happen, but it appears that India is far away from the per capita consumption level. India has to grow. Compulsions of countries like India, particularly India, will continue. And then when we need to grow on per capita consumption, there can be no other solution because there could be limiting factors even on solar or wind. You have a potential to which you can go. You have land requirement, you have so many things. So you have potential. So even if you take the potentials which have been identified and are likely to be identified, there is a number to which you can rise. You can't go unlimited number. So I think, nobody knows what will happen in 2040 to 2050. But that is one projection after analyzing various information one comes to that you will still have billion units more than you are having billion units because 30% of the total generation then will be less than, will be more than the 70% of generation today. So that is what Mr. Bhattacharya asked. One point that is emerging very clearly today that this discussion, obviously, it had to be a mixed discussion. It is not only a discussion on regulation and what type of policy dimensions the policy intervention the regulatory commission should do. And to that extent, it has involved a discussion on renewable versus non-renewable, etc., etc. So that cannot be avoided. One thing that emerged, and response of Mr. Pujari was very apt and very correct, that there is a need to, and I had also mentioned that there is a need for faster response, considering the fast nature of technological changes and the type of things that are happening in the energy sector. Whether we are fast enough or we need to be a little more on these issues proactively. And the point that Rahul made, he was very critical. He has been critical of almost everybody. That he has been bringing these points and nobody is listening, and then there's, so many things. So one strategy for him can be that he can be less critical and then still persuade people. So that is one that really we need to be faster. Our response time has to be better. And to that extent, all regulations of the CERC and the state may need to be revisited from the point of view of how do they reflect the concerns and the nature of response that is needed insofar as the urgent need of a progressive decarbonization of our energy sector happens. It can't happen overnight, a progressive. So to that extent, there is considerable scope to revisit and to that extent change as fast as possible. But I do agree with Mr. Pujari that the regulatory process is such, it is a consultative process. It requires hearing, it requires the views of so many organizations. Like just now, Rahul made a point. He was critical in his concluding slide. He says PSP is raising a doubt, whereas there are many who are saying pump storage is the right thing to do, and let's get back to hydropower and pump storage. So I think views could differ, and we have always faced that problem. If you have a renewable conference, renewable, you have coal conference, coal is the answer. So we need to reconcile. So to that extent, and my view also is that there is a scope today, even for pump storage. That does not mean every situation pump storage will be the solution. One has to study the economics of this. One has to study the location and to what extent it can be helped, and that can definitely happen. One point that emerged loud and clear, and I also made, but many of you have made that point. That is, in today's context, the way solar has come, this decentralized solar for particularly rural area and particularly covering the agricultural consumption during daytime should have become more extensive than it has become today. I am not saying it has not happened, as nothing has happened, but on a 0 to 100 scale, maybe 60, 70 could have happened throughout the country, maybe 20 or 15%, I mean, that sort of a marking rate you can give. So that is something which requires fast response. It also takes care of, in a big way, in a significant way, our challenge of renewable energy, variable load, the transmission system planning, etc., etc. That is something low-hanging fruit. I agree with Rahul that let us not have the habit of announcing big, 100 gigawatt, 200. Of course, he also announced 160 gigawatts, so he should also desist. Let us get into, can we have megawatt stage, 100 megawatt, 1 gigawatt, that sort of thing, and get going on the storage or various system of backup that is needed for this. I think the regulation on RPO, I mean, Rakesh has a strong view. To what extent RPO prop is even now needed? It is not needed because people have understood the economics of power generation. RPO came in the context when the power price of the renewable was very high. So I think view could differ. I mean, even if it is not stopped today or regulated today or moderated today, time is coming that this issue will have to be seriously considered, whether RPO continues to be relevant and to what extent and to what period will be relevant. One cannot say that tomorrow we stop it or maybe 2 years we can stop it. But obviously, when solar price has come to 250 or less and even wind is doing well, do you need a prop of, when it's an obligation for the buyer that you must buy so much of energy. Today, states are becoming, discoms are becoming commercially more conscious of the thing, and they are themselves taking care. There are pressure on them to buy on an optimal manner. I think these are some of the points we will continue to persuade regulatory commissions, state commissions, to look at things. Today's thrust was on how do we progressively reduce the carbon footprint. And to that extent, the way subjects have come up, this seminar has been very successful. Right from the beginning, the points have been raised and responded to. Seminar definitely has also considered many of the planning processes which need to go into this. And I made the point in the beginning, I do believe that overarching, not authority, overarching expectation from regulatory commission in the whole scheme of dynamics of authorities is there from the regulatory commission. I do have a view that to a great extent we have succeeded, to a great extent we have not succeeded, because somehow we have remained very much preoccupied on tariff, and some of the developmental aspects need to be taken care of a little more than they have been taken care of. With that, I thank you very much for such a keen interest and such a good debate. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.